Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm super excited to introduce to you Michael Pirson, who is a legendary professor. He's an area chair at the Fordham's University. And you're also the president of the International Humanistic Management Group. Is that?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty fancy.
Yeah. You can create organizations, can create titles with that. So,
And I'll just share with you who Michael Pearson is for me because I think we all need a Michael Pearson in our lives. I'll never forget when you were like cheering me on, like you're recreating me so powerfully, and then my wife got jealous, and she's like, "Sounds like Michael Pearson loves you so much," and then she was like, "Who is this guy who loves you so much?" I'll never forget that. I was like, "Oh my god, babe, are you jealous of this guy?" She's like, "Yeah, why is he cheering you on so much?"
because you rock.
Yeah. Um, but just to provide some context, we first met at Landmark's Self-Expression Leadership Program, which is the third out of the curriculum for living. So essentially, it's was it like a 4 month program where we really got to like work on our projects, and both you and I were definitely folks that were up on the mic a lot, sharing, like, being on the court, and just being very engaged. So I'll never forget when I called you. It's just interesting. Like there's certain people that you call, and like afterwards you're left very empowered, and you you recreate others in your listening, and you did that just like 5 seconds ago before we started the podcast. It's saying that I'm not playing big enough. So I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Davidson, for having me. And who you are to me is just like this powerhouse that sometimes sits on the sidelines and you refuse the power that you could stand in, and you're just so amazing. Everything that you're doing, like you're taking it on so deeply. The transformation that you're sharing about yourself and with others. I mean, you're like a hub for empowerment, a generous creator of love and life and enlivenment, and it's so awesome to see, and so it's perfect. So
Thank you.
yeah.
And I know that our intention of this call is to, well, not only introduce people into this beautiful world and community of Landmark, but also like would love to for you to share, and we'll get there.
Mhm.
Share a little bit more about what it was like being team one team leader. And for those who don't know, Michael Pearson came in very powerful. So he was extremely effective in transformation for one of the biggest teams, if not the biggest team at Landmark. And yeah, so there's so much to talk about, but I definitely want to get there as well.
Got it. And maybe for some of your viewers in the context is that is a sort of advanced training program where you really get to experience yourself as someone that causes effective leadership and creates effective leadership through teams and teamwork. And I'll just assert that most of the people that are listening to this are up to big things in their lives, right? And so the bigger things you're up to, the more you get present to that you can't do it alone. And so how do you create it with others? So that's the kind
Mm.
of program that both Davidson and I are in, and I think it's just one of the most powerful training programs to be in, if and I assert everybody is up to something big.
Mm.
And just getting present to how that can be done, rather than what I had it sort of be like suffering
Mm.
and working hard and working more. It's like, no, it's actually there's freedom and ease possible. It's like you can accomplish a lot by creating teams and teamwork in a way that actually is it's like super enjoyable. It's like it's a way of life where it's like things fall into place. You create and cause them in a way that I certainly didn't think was possible.
Mm. I love what you said about a lot of times when we're doing it ourselves, like we suffer, right? It's like, oh man, like being the martyr, like why does everyone, I have so much burden, like I gotta pay the bills, like I gotta carry the weight, like I gotta
Mhm.
project manage this. And it sounds like you really discovered the possibilities and empowering others to step up as well.
Yeah, and that's just such a crazy thing, because at some point when you do that, it's like you don't necessarily notice that you do it, but things occur, things happen. And if there's intentionality and clarity around what you're creating, these things can happen with freedom and ease, as we say. And that oftentimes to me did not occur like I'm doing something. In fact, it's like um I remember the moment. It's like, oh, I'm like I made such progress with my project, which at the time had included a documentary, which I didn't know anything about before I was starting it. But then it's like, oh my God, the team is there, the people, the content, everything is done. It's like, and I didn't do much. I was having some beers. Well,
No.
but so that was sort of like, wow, that is the context in which I can accomplish things that I didn't think were possible, or would only be possible with the kind of working three times as hard,
Mm,
forcing things, doing it my way or the highway, and therefore
mm,
like having it be like I'm this martyr. Yeah, I'm the guy who saves the world by like suffering. And it's like,
uh,
oh my God, that's just like, that's no good. That's no good for me. That's no good for my family, for my kids, for everybody else that
mm,
I'm claiming I create a better world for, right? It's like,
mm.
that's just such inauthentic bullshit. And so, yeah, so when I got present to that, that's possible, it's like I didn't believe it. And I
That's
thought I
a-
was
mm.
cheating. I thought I was cheating.
Oh, that's pretty deep, actually. I think many of us can relate to the, oh, if we work harder, we'll get more results. And in a
Hmm.
weird way, that's not always the case, right? It's
Well,
sometimes.
it's almost never the case, probably,
Mm,
because you're getting so burned out that you're playing smaller and smaller and smaller, and you avoid and avoid and avoid. At least for me, it was like I would sleep in bed, I would stay in bed, I didn't want to get out. I was like, screw the world, all these kind of things. And I
mm,
notice how I have some of that toxic cycle in my head going on as a story of like how I am the only one that cares. Most people don't care, so why should I care? And then once I get back into like a certain snippet of possibility, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll just rush it through. Like in one day, I do what I avoided for 2 months, and so like that's just it's not very sustainable, right? Because before that, it leads up ineffectiveness, suffering, maybe drinking too much, some kind of the compensatory crazy behavior,
mm.
or other things. It's like being angry,
Huh,
and then it's like, okay, well, that's not really the life I want to live, and that's the life I've lived,
huh.
right? And so it's the only thing I know, and so it seems like that's just the way it has to be. And suffering, I think we have it. Like work is good, and I'm not from the US, but everybody that I sort of notice, like when I ask them how are you doing, like they say busy,
So true.
and it's like, and they wear it like a badge of honor, like I'm
Yeah,
busy.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. Like in Germany where I grew up, it's like if you say you're busy, it means you're poorly organized. And here everybody was so proud of like I'm busy,
Huh.
busy, 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 busy. And it's like, okay, what are you busy with? But then I
Mm.
also became busy, 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 and it just was like so much actionism, activity with very little impact. And it's like, what are we busy with? I was busy with avoiding. I was busy with doing lots of other things that were not connected to what I wanted to create, but I didn't take the time out. Or worse, I did take some time out and I got more done than most of the other busy people. And I took it like, huh, I'm better than you. I'm
Oh,
better than you,
that's deep.
right?
Yeah.
And then it stopped me at even like creating more, creating more. And I was still playing by myself.
Huh.
And
That's
so
deep.
anyhow, but
Yeah.
that's sort of what I'm getting about this program, how you can create without suffering, or you can create and cause with freedom and ease. And sometimes where love and affinity are present, which I can tell you is not the case in many of my sort of projects.
Hmm. It's funny hearing you speak about this because I like just judging from the outside because I'm not you, right? I'm always like, oh, his life
Mm.
is probably perfect. He's probably just crushing every aspect of life, you know? So it's just funny hearing you say this because I'm like, I can't even see that being like a possibility that you have this many breakdowns, you know?
Oh yeah, well, and so that's the thing. That's the other thing that I'm getting present to is like the power of breakdowns as making it mean nothing. That's just something
Mm,
that happens if you're up to big things, right? You're going to be out of
yeah.
integrity, or you're going to have breakdowns just because you're up to bigger things. And that's like
Mm,
you want to have breakdowns, like you want to almost force breakdowns, and it's like it's a great thing because then you can stop and you can notice newly like what's not working, like
mm,
which promises, which arrangements, which relationships aren't really in integrity or in a workable condition. And now that I'm saying that, it's like, oh my God, yeah, you know what? There's so many things I think you can always clean up. And I think Werner Erhard and others are saying integrity is a mountain without a top, right? So yes, there's always a higher level of performance should you choose it.
mm,
And so I think it's just like, yeah, from the outside, some of the things look like, yeah, they're easy, just freedom and all of that. And there probably is in comparison to what it was before. And still,
mm,
it's like, hey, I'm climbing, and I'm climbing. And while there is maybe more fun, and I can say that like you introduced me, I'm like the area or department chair in a group at Fordham University. Our department probably has more fun and,
mm,
and more affinity and love present than probably
mm,
any that I know of.
mm,
And there's still a lot more that can be done. We can still be more effective, create more programs, create more, right? So,
mm,
and what I'm getting present to is like, yeah, I'm still in the space of suffering and surviving the bureaucracy of a university and
mm,
and all the boss, whatever, the power relationships and all that. It's like, okay, I want to transform that.
mm. Yeah, it's so how about before we start, let's give up from the already always and then the new because I think it's awesome to model like what a typical
Mhm,
meeting
mhm,
is like, and then
mhm,
we
mhm.
can create would that be cool?
Yeah, super, 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 yeah.
Okay, so the context for people who aren't familiar with what we're doing is at the beginning of every meeting, we give up from the already always paradigm, which sometimes gets in the way of us like creating from a blank slate. So the people in the meeting will just like say out loud like what they're giving up.
So one of the things that I constantly give up is the point of view that I trap myself in, that I'm not enough and the world doesn't get me. And so I'm giving that up. I
Hmm.
have it, you will all get me. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm giving up defending and protecting and avoiding and withholding.
Hmm. Yeah. My often so my point of view that I often trap myself in is I'm unlovable and the world is cruel.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I'll also give that up. And the stuff that I often give up every morning is convincing, um, like explaining, defending, like a lot of righteousness, essentially.
Awesome, 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 awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and then
Great.
the second portion is we would put in newly from the new paradigm of communication. And these are from the landmarks, communication, access to power, and power to create courses for those who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, so what I'm creating newly is recreation, acknowledgement, and I love generosity and being cause in the matter. That's just like
Mm,
I thrive on that. So I'm creating that.
that's awesome. Yes, I also recreation, myself and others, acknowledgement, and creating from nothing.
Oi. Woohoo.
Put in. Cool. And what's the possibility for our podcast today?
You tell me. I have it. It is empowerment.
Yes, yeah. Empowerment. I hear you being very vulnerable, which I appreciate. So I hear a sense of like relatedness
Hmm.
and just authentic sharing. especially in the business context. I think not, people sometimes aren't as authentic or as vulnerable. Um, so yeah, I think
So the possibility of authentic sharing, vulnerability, and empowerment.
yes,
Yes?
in
All right. So
communication.
I'll generate that. Who
Okay.
we are is the possibility of empowerment, vulnerability, and authentic sharing in communication.
Yes. All
Yes.
right. Love it.
Awesome.
Uh, cool. Yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought it was just good for us to always
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah. No, super.
so I'm curious, like what made you like how did you find out about team initially? And then what made you want
Mm,
to be team leader? Were you
mm.
kind of like picked, or was it sort of like a conscious decision?
So maybe for context, so I had a colleague in the program, team management and leadership program. Patrick Strubio is his name, and he's also a colleague at Fordham. But he is out in the world. He's like a social innovator, a social entrepreneur, bigwig in many ways. And so he shared at some point that he's doing this program because he sees that he, even though he's the highest accolades at many levels, he gets a lot out of it. And I said, I'm up to big things. I know that I need support and in a better way.
Mm,
Even though I'm a professor and I'm teaching about teams and leadership and all that, it's like, oh man, there's something not working right now because I don't have the massive resources that other people have when they're managing teams, and they're sort of using a different way of managing teams. And so I got present to that as an opportunity, and he said, yeah, I need to do these 2 communication courses. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, so I'm going to do those because I think this is going to do something for me. So I basically enrolled in all of these communication courses because I saw the possibility for me to doing this team program. Now, I remember that we were in SELP together and that program was almost never mentioned,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I went to Yvonne and I asked other people, like, what about this team management program? Because I heard that's like something that I want to do. And it's always the introduction leader program, which is more, I think you're getting a lot out of that if you're doing like individual, like development, etc. And I haven't done that, but I knew that I wanted to do the other part, this team management and
Mhm.
leadership program. And so yeah, I was just looking for that. I was just looking for that. It was not easy to find. I think others call it the best hidden secret at Landmark.
Oh,
And so then once I was in this program, I was sort of like sitting in the back seat, and it's a year-long program, 4 quarters, and you always create games and games in the world. And I knew what I was going to play in terms of transforming business education, something that I'd already done in SELP. And so I wanted to continue that and build that. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to watch what this was. It was at the time, the first time that we were on Zoom and we were doing this in the COVID time. And so I think you're asking me, did I want to be team leader? It's like, I didn't know what that was. I thought it's like, okay, there was one person that sort of runs the meeting. It's like, that's fine. Somebody can run that for me. I don't want to do that. Well, I never saw that there was any possibility. But then what occurred was that in this program, you have accountabilities. And that's basically the structure of how you create teams and teamwork. It's through the notion of foundation of integrity, but then accountability. There are certain
Mm,
promises that are made as team, and then you have one person that's accountable, and that person then makes sure that the team works to fulfill that promise. So if you look at in the real world, if you say you want to make $1 million or something as a team, okay, well that's the promise. Then how do you get that done? This is this and this how you set the team up, and how you hold each other to account. And so I was asked to do that, to step into one of those accountabilities, which is called the Game in the World accountability, in my second quarter, because there was a disruption there, and I didn't know what to do. I was busy in my job, and I said, okay, well, I'm just going to do it, not knowing what it was. And that's where I experienced myself being confronted and challenged, and really also transforming my way of being by just having other people confront me about who I am being in the context of a team and holding people to account, and how I'm making them wrong. It's like, yeah, you're
mm,
here for this or you're here for that.
mm,
So WTF, why you're not getting on it, right? And so I was always used to working with high performers that would self-generate and all of that. And when that wasn't the case, it's like, oh, screw this. I'm angry, I'm upset. So that is just
Huh.
not very effective. And I was presented with that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there are all many the other things. And so how can I get to work with more people effectively? So anyhow, I was hooked. I think we came in effective in that promise that quarter, even though it never looked like that. So just at the very end.
Hmm.
And I saw that that gave me such a thrill and transformation in my own life and just
Huh.
willingness to look at who I am being that I thought I want more.
Mhm.
And so when we choose our quarterly leadership, I I never thought about it, but there was like you choose the team leader, and I just raised my hand. I didn't know that I
Huh.
would, and I didn't know why, but I just thought this is cool. So I wasn't chosen. And I was excited by that too, because I think there's something that I certainly avoid is like failing or not being chosen or whatever
Mhm.
occurs as something like that. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm not chosen. I'm not chosen. So go on. And so just getting present to all of these things. And then I took on another accountability that was the team expansion accountability. And I got so much out of that for me because I'm a person that avoids whole and complete work.
Hmm.
And in some way, I have a story that I pride myself. And I think in some of the SELP seminars, I got present to how I have the story running. It's like too embarrassing to say, but yeah, that I'm a genius and I don't need this stuff. Like I don't need a calendar. Or the stories that I have about genius is like you're disordered. You don't have order. That's like a signal of being smart. It's like you have it all in your head. So everybody that cleans up their desk is a loser. Stuff like that. And so I had it in my head that was the thing. And so I still
Huh.
avoid cleaning up my desk, but I got present to like this is a story that's potentially disempowering and undermining everything else that I want to do in my life because I avoid whole and complete work because I have this notion in my head that that's not who a quote unquote smart person, genius, or something is.
Huh.
So I got to really get present to all this inauthentic BS and just sharing that right now is like, oh my God, like probably 2 or 3 years ago, I would not have been present to that, or I would feel
Mhm.
like that's just too private to share, or that's just like
Mhm.
not even true, or having some kind of defense mechanism. Now, just being present to that, how that has been ineffective for myself it's is helpful. And so when I was in this team expansion accountability, just got present to the power of integrity, the power of just keeping and honoring your word and making it mean nothing. That yes, well, when you're up to big things, things will fail. Things
Mhm.
will not fail, but things will just not be in integrity all the time. That's just part of it. But
Mhm.
then getting your power back. So then when I was in that accountability, I just thought, hey, this is so awesome. I want more of it. I wanted to take on that training. So that's when I stood for Team One Team Leader. And that's when you have to basically, quote unquote, they call it, to be the CEO of an organization of 50, 60, 70 people.
Huh.
And yeah, you know that you can't control everybody. You
Mhm.
know that you can't just choose the high performers.
Hmm.
You can't just like create the world that you want and then bitch and moan, which I tend to do. It's like, oh, okay, if something is not working, then it's probably somebody else's fault.
Huh.
And then feel good about it, bitching and moaning with my friends.
That it's so fascinating hearing you say all this because it's like when you really dive deep into someone's psyche, it's so different than how others perceive them from the outside, you know?
Huh.
So like seeing you like since I've joined team, I'm like, oh, this guy's unstoppable Superman. Like he has no problems. And then I'm like, oh, actually he's like a normal human being like myself. So crazy, huh? And
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's just like that access to very quick transformation or just reflection of what's there, what's not working, right? And so when I was
yeah.
Team One Team Leader and you'd asked me to share a little bit about that, it's just like, how do you cause people to be effective, especially when they don't want to?
Hmm.
When they are standing in their own leadership, when they are refusing to stand in their own power, when they are not willing to give up whatever is in their space. And so that got me so present to what you're saying, Davidson. It's like what does life look like from the other person's head perspective, right? Being in their world.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh my God, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why you would not want to be in your power, why you don't see this, right? But then I see myself, you know what? I'm refusing my own power all the time.
Mm.
And then I can build bridges and I can be more empathetic, which I'm not. I just discover that, right? That I'm not very empathetic, like, or not to the level where I say I would be, or that in many ways I'm empathetic to some people, and others,
Um,
like, I say, screw you, like,
hmm.
you're an idiot, right?
I
And so it's
see.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God, yeah, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that?
Mm.
Oh, okay. Well, and if I want to transform the world, like, my game is transforming a world to, well, creating a world that works for everyone. I'm like, this is so freaking inauthentic that I'm just discarding, I think, most people,
Huh.
or not even willing to be in their world, because I'm just thinking, like, yeah, loser.
Huh. Maybe that's why we connected so much, because I didn't have that awareness too. And I was also judging like a lot of people too, where I'm like, well, Michael Pearson and Darlise are and Chris Hardy, they're cool. Like I'll hang out with them, but I'm definitely
Mm-hmm.
not hanging out with these so-called, I
Yeah,
would never call them loser to their face, but who I'm being is basically sending that same message, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm not saying that I called them losers, but for me in my head, what was going on, I was dismissing people, and I still am, I'm still am.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, I have a certain standard, whatever is in my
Mm.
background, whatever is like, it's like, oh, okay, well, so I can't be with
Mm.
somebody that's like not self-generating, or I
That's
can't
deep.
be with
Yeah.
somebody. Yeah, and it's like, oh, and then I'm getting like, well, if I want to create a world that works for everyone, guess what? This is what I can give up. This is what I can create newly, or where I can train myself, because most people, unfortunately, that's why we have the world that we have, aren't in the space of being empowered, aren't in the space of being vulnerable and authentic, right? They're like hiding, they're withholding,
Mhm.
they're not they're not where we are, in a sense where it's like, yeah, you want to hear about the other people's world, or you want to be willing to share, or you're like quick at sort of identifying something. um and maybe I'm not quick, right, but I'm sort of like willing to take it on and be confronted by somebody.
Mm.
And it's never nice. But I
That's
think
that's pretty deep.
you're out there, you're like training yourself massively, right? You're expanding, you're expanding. And I assert you have a possibility to get in another person's world if you choose.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. So for me, my version of that is like I was judging the hell out of like unhealthy people, what I perceive to be like people who are not taking care of their fitness.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I mean, like you said, a lot of this was unconscious, right? Before I did landmark courses and Tony Robbins and things like this. And
Hmm.
I was like, but then I was like reflecting, I was like, wow, like I have every time I make a group of friends, I'll cut them out because I think I've moved on to better things, you know? And I'm like, that's not cool. Like they still reach out to me, they still hang out. And I don't necessarily have to say yes every time, but it's
Hmm.
like, who am I being when they reach out, right? I could be nice and just be like, oh, hey, like, me and my wife have other plans, like we're doing board game
Hmm.
night. Or I could be judgmental and be like, nah, like I don't drink anymore. That's like for losers, like I'm done past that. It's like the same thing, but it's like affects not only does it affect the other person, but I guess more for me, it's like it just doesn't make me feel like I'm being inauthentic, like you said. Like
Hmm.
here I am supposed to be this guy who's like super nice and super compassionate, very empathetic, and then yet I'm judging like everyone essentially, especially myself, you know?
Oh yeah, that's where this is. I think something that comes up over and over is like, well, all of this is actually a judgment with myself. It's like I'm getting present to how I am when I'm not empathetic and compassionate, how I'm reliving some, like, communication not recreated from some
Mm,
earlier time, right? When I felt I was not allowed to, or be understood or heard or something like that. I needed to get over stuff, right? And
mm,
I just did this morning with Leia, that you also interviewed, is just like just getting present to some of the communication that wasn't gotten in my earlier life that got me to be in that point of view that I'm not enough and the world doesn't get me, right? And so it's like I'm rough with myself.
Mm,
Like I keep telling myself, get over it, get over it, get over it. Like this shouldn't hurt you. This shouldn't do this shouldn't do that. So I'm not compassionate with myself very much. And of
mm,
course, then I'm not passing this on to my kids or my wife or my students
mm,
or whoever else is in the space. And it's just like judging them the way that I judge myself, the way that I felt I was judged. And
mm,
it's like this perpetual cycle of disempowerment, which is right. It's like the judgment is actually sort of a kind of a weird way to be empower that disempowers,
mm,
because I cut more and more people out of my life, and I know I would be doing this over and over and over and just moving on to new people, new people, new people, new
mm.
people, new people, starting with high expectations and then saying done, enough, next, 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 next,
Huh.
and then I'll just be myself all the time.
Mm. Well said. You just took the words out of my mouth. Like that's actually why I joined team. Because if I kept continuing on this pace, I would have a lot of friends on like LinkedIn and like connections, but
Mm,
ultimately I'd be by myself, like lonely and probably divorced, and my kids will hate me because I'm not there because I'm busy
mm.
traveling or doing other things. Like I was like, I need to
Healing the world.
interrupt. Yeah. Yeah. Being right, like trying to save the world, trying to fix the world, whatever it is. Yeah, that's very deep.
Yeah, man. Now that you're sharing that, that sort of gets present to me too. It's like, yeah, I have this savior complex in a way where it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can do this. I mean, my wife, you should treat and respect me because I'm out there in the world saving the world, quote unquote. But yeah, I can sometimes then be rough or dismiss you because look who I am.
Mm,
So being in
yeah.
that space where it's like that's disempowering ultimately, right? It is empowering or sort of gratifying in a weird way for the moment.
Mm, yeah.
Wow, Davidson, I acknowledge you. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting my training here.
No, it's funny you mentioned the wife thing, right? Because like that was exactly like one of the things Lay and I talk about a lot is just that like, and then I cleaned this up with her, thank God, right? But I shared with her that I was coming from this like holier than thou, like I know everything because I've read all the books and I've done all this and I've followed like the smartest people in the world and I'm just smarter than everyone, you know? So I came into this like, oh, people who don't donate to nonprofits, they're worthless. Like they're materialistic. Like I was judging
Mm,
like a lot of
mhm,
people.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
then I was like, who I'm being about it makes me worse than everyone that I'm judging because I'm who I'm being is just very judgmental and thinking that I'm just smarter than the rest of the world. And she was pointing this out, like she was kind of like, and then when I finally cleaned that up with her, she's like, wow, like thank you. Like she felt understood, you
You're
know.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and what the most amazing, miraculous things happen when you clean this up, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I did that with my kids. I remember when I cleaned up with my youngest. And the funny thing is that they already know that I'm that way.
Huh. Mm.
And I don't know, I don't remember what I cleaned up with them, but it was just like similar to that I feel I'm better than you. I've done all the books, I've all the degrees, I've got the whatever quote unquote records, and so you gotta listen.
Yeah. I mean, as a parent, I feel like it's harder, right? Because I think the nature of at least most societies is that parents know better. And, I think every person, as you know, because you have kids, like each person has their own values and their own goals and their own they don't necessarily want the same things as what the parents want, right? Um,
Well, and maybe they do, but it's oftentimes like maybe out of just fear and avoidance that they pursue certain things. Where I mean, I mean, I have the same kind of debate in my head. Is like I'm the father, I should guide them. I'm the parent, I'm not their friend.
mm,
I'm also not their coach. I'm not their mentor in that sense, right? Whatever that may
yeah,
mean, because they're little, they don't know much, right? So
yeah.
that's oftentimes where I come from. Whether now that I'm saying that, that like, whoa, that's so disgusting. But but it's like, yeah, um, I also think that the kids assume that I should do that. Well, once I sort of break that assumption and just ask them, it turns out that maybe they want that, or maybe they're of course, right? But sometimes they're also saying, like right now, this morning, I had this sort of conversation, and then I went back to my kids and said, "Sorry, guys, if I dismiss you sometimes."
Mm.
And my middle son sort of just nodded knowingly and was like, "Okay, got it." The oldest was saying, "Yeah, like your voice. I don't like your voice when you tell us to calm down."
Oh, okay.
Oh my God. Okay. So what is like always? It's like, yes, when you tell us to come down and get ready, it's like, I don't want to come down. It's like, but just knowing
Oh,
that and just being in a conversation about it, that can open up something new. I don't know what it will
oh,
be, but then it's like, okay, if you don't want me to call you like that, so how can we create a space where it's workable so that you're actually in the car and I don't have to go crazy?
oh, that's beautiful that you have the space to do that. That's rare, honestly.
Yeah, and it's just a creation. It's just a creation, and it's funny because I mean they get some of those things intuitively, and it's not so like I with my coworkers I might need more space or time or something to create a conversation that doesn't sound awkward like that.
Huh.
But but yeah, and just to share, because the youngest one, he was totally sort of against this conversation, said, "Shut up, daddy, shut up, daddy, shut up, daddy." So
Yeah.
so it's not always like, yeah, this is all working out beautifully and what is it, butterflies. But and it's just like, oh, okay, there is
Huh.
something there.
It's so funny. I mean, maybe funny is not the right word, but anytime I interview anyone who's like the top of the game, who I put on a pedestal, I see the humanity and like the commonality that we all experience, like basically the same thing. And it's always so mind-blowing to me because I'm always like, oh yeah, like they probably do everything right and they never mess up. And then it's just like, oh, okay, this is very similar to the same thoughts that we all go through, right? It's just
Well, that's the thing. It's like
crazy.
we have this common humanity, right? And then some of us
Yeah.
are more present to it, or getting more present to it, or we have this privilege in this training program to just get more present to that with each other. And just at least what I'm getting from it is like a permission to explore this more. Because
Hmm.
in the traditional outside world, I would try to defend and hide and feel like I cannot be human, quote unquote, right? I
Hmm.
cannot be vulnerable. I cannot be weak. I cannot have these conversations.
Hmm.
Or I'm judged when I'm, as a parent, inviting my kids into a dialogue around how I treat them. Right?
Yeah.
Or even
Yeah.
the students, if I open it up to the students, it's like the students in that, without that context, they're like totally lost. Like, who, professor, professor, why are you even having this conversation with us? Like, you're
Hmm.
not a real professor, right?
Really?
Yeah. So without that traditional, without that context, many of those conversations that sort of ultimately reveal the shared humanity are not accepted in a traditional way, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe
That's
that's a story, but that's sort of something that I experienced, and that's why I think this program is so powerful.
No, I mean, I agree, right? Redefining masculinity, the book
Mm,
kind of explores some of these concepts around who men are supposed to be, around their lack of vulnerability, and how society wants them to be like strong and hold it in, or like, tough it out and stuff like that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I know you're German as well, and I think that's probably also in German. I work for a company that's based in Germany,
Hmm.
So I also understand some of that as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, in America, this is how we do it, and then they're just like, we need more order, we need structure, we need like that, like, and I'm just like, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and all those conventions in a way they're agreements, right? And they can be rethought, recreated. Sometimes they're really workable and work and support,
Mhm.
and other times not.
Yeah.
The typical reaction is either you bitch about it or you accept it and you sort of like bow to it, right?
Mm.
And it's like neither is empowering.
Huh. That's a good point. Yeah, I do think because of Landmark, I definitely am not afraid to challenge the status quo a lot
Mhm.
more. And sometimes, like, I still don't get what I want, right? But at least I plant the seed, and then eventually there's change. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and maybe sometimes it's just like, yeah, I don't know, it's like change for change's sake may not work.
Yeah.
Or maybe Davidson's perspective is interesting, but it doesn't work for 3,000 other people that don't see it
Mhm.
that way, right?
That's true.
Just being able to self-express and contribute and even get the other perspective. I, I think that's just what's missing in most organizations. That's missing in most relationships.
Mm.
I mean, now
Yeah.
that I'm saying that, it's constantly missing with my wife. It's like every
Yeah.
morning getting in her head. I was like, oh my God, no.
I mean, same here. That's what I got out of the communication, both access to power and power to create, was like, oh, no wonder she's been repeating, because I don't listen to when she complains. I like tune out. I'm like, oh God, she's gonna complain again. And then after finally, when I did the course, I finally listened to her. Now she never complains about that anymore. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, well, it's so easy once you get that, right? But then
Yeah.
like it's so hard to get it. And then I'm still refusing to be in the space of my wife that I sort of have like, oh, she's gonna complain again. Oh no, I can't. I can't do that again.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still have areas, certain topics that she talks about. Like COVID-19, for instance. I'm like out, right? I'm still in the discovery of,
Mm,
and I'm becoming better at it, because I'm like, she just cares a lot about the humanity, and I'm
mm,
just being an American caring about my freedom and liberty. And it's like,
mm.
I need, giving it up will save me a lot of energy and save us. It's just not worth it, at the end of the day.
I think it's probably that's the cool thing about life. You'll never have it figured out,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Or if you think you do, then you're probably totally, I don't know, stuck somewhere. Like you know why you're stuck or how the world works according to you, and
Mhm.
that like nobody else agrees, but that's like you figured it out. And I think the beautiful thing about this work is like, yeah, life actually offers something interesting every day.
Mhm.
And if you're open to discovering that, that's like, oh, great day. One of the things that I remember is there was an analogy made, I think, by some forum leaders, like how we were excited to get up in the morning and how we hated going to bed in the evening because there was so much to explore, so much to do in a day, and getting to bed when the parents are saying now you need to go to bed, that was like a punishment,
Yeah.
right? And then getting up early was like, oh, exciting, exciting,
Uh,
exciting. And then there's a time in life when that shifts, right? And it's like, oh, going to bed may be the best thing, or staying in bed may be the best thing. It's like you're avoiding life. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so present. That's right. I
Mm.
have my youngest kid. He's getting up early in the morning. I don't know why. He's waking us up. He's waking us up, but he's so excited.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I just lost curiosity,
Hmm.
and I think I figured it out, and I'm like stuck in a place that's just not exciting. So getting into the head of my wife or everybody else is kind of juicy.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michael Pearson. I appreciate your vulnerability, and I get your commitment to being the most amazing father, husband, area chair, professor, humanitarian, and just here you're being the world is just a clearing, a vulnerable, like masculine energy who's also empathetic, who's also constantly on the discovery to just be the best person he can be for his family and the world. So I really appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Davidson. You rock. I'm a big fan, as you know, right? And you're making a huge difference. And just hosting this, taking the time out of your day to listen to people, being curious. I assert that that juices you up, that gives you something exciting
Yeah,
for the day, right?
it
And
does.
for sharing that gift, because it does give something to me as well. So I
Well,
really appreciate
and
it.
and this is crazy, right? Like just recording this, like your legacy, like professors like 100 years from now might listen to this and get something out of it, right? It's just one of
Yeah.
those, it's just a crazy concept, but that's what I'm realizing because I recorded some podcasts like 7 years ago and people are still listening to it because I'll get notifications when they listen to it. And I'm just like,
Mm.
this is from 7 years ago. This is so crazy.
Awesome. Awesome. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I
Yeah.
acknowledge you. This is powerful, and I'm gonna take something from that because, yeah,
Cool. Well,
inspiring.
enjoy the rest of your day and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Davidson. Same here. Keep it up. Say hello to your wife.
Ah, yes, will do.
I'm a big fan.